When people think of the Roman Empire, they picture shining armor, grand speeches, and powerful emperors ruling from marble thrones. But the truth is much darker. Rome didn't rise through wisdom and diplomacy. It rose through bloodshed, fear, and ruthless domination. Long before the Roman Empire became a symbol of civilization, it was a brutal war machine. Its success was built on the back of violent conquest, and no figure represents that better than Julius Caesar. Caesar's military campaigns in Gaul weren't just battles, they were massacres. Entire villages were wiped out, men were slaughtered, women and children were taken as slaves, and those who resisted were tortured or crucified. Some estimates say nearly 1 million Gauls died under Caesar's sword. He didn't just defeat them, he wanted to erase them. And for what? Glory, gold, and power. The Senate back in Rome cheered. The people celebrated. Caesar returned not just as a general, but as a celebrity, and eventually a dictator. But this wasn't an isolated case. Rome's pattern of expansion followed the same formula over and over: invade, kill, enslave, control. It didn't matter if the victims were Celtic tribes in Britain, Carthaginians in Africa, or Greek city-states. They all faced the same fate if they stood in Rome's way. The Roman army was feared not just because of its discipline, but because of its cruelty. Soldiers were trained to see mercy as weakness. Civilians were often slaughtered just to send a message. Cities were burned to the ground. Survivors? They were paraded through the streets of Rome as trophies before being sold off like cattle. Beneath the polished floors of Roman villas and the towering monuments that still stand today was a hidden engine human suffering on an unimaginable scale. Rome was built on slavery. At its peak, over 1/3 of the entire population were enslaved people. That means for every 2 free citizens walking the streets, there was likely 1 person who had no rights, no freedom, and no future. Slaves weren't just servants. They were laborers, teachers, builders, entertainers, and victims. Some were captured in war. Others were born into slavery. But no matter how they arrived in chains, their lives were owned completely. They could be beaten, sold, starved, or even killed at their master's whim, and the law did nothing to protect them. Imagine being forced to work endless hours in the mines, deep underground with barely any light or air, or being pushed into the brutal heat of the Roman countryside to farm the land, chained to dozens of others, with overseers whipping anyone who slowed down. This was daily life for millions of people who would never appear in the history books. And then there were the gladiators, Rome's most famous slaves. People often glamorized them like they were sports stars, but the truth is far more horrific. Gladiators were mostly prisoners or enslaved men forced to fight to the death for public entertainment. Their blood was spilled in arenas while crowds screamed for more. Some gladiators became legends, but most died nameless. The Roman Colosseum could hold up to 50,000 people, all hungry for violence. It wasn't a game, it was a slaughterhouse disguised as a spectacle. One man tried to fight back: Spartacus, a former gladiator who led a slave uprising so massive it shook Rome to its core. Tens of thousands joined him, fighting for freedom. But when the rebellion was crushed, Rome made an example. Over 6,000 rebels were crucified along the Appian Way, left to rot in public as a warning to anyone else who dared to resist. That's how Rome kept control, not through loyalty or love, but through fear. A society that called itself civilized was built on the broken backs of those it refused to see as human. And while the world marveled at Roman achievements, few ever asked, who paid the real price for that greatness? But slavery was just one layer of Rome's cruelty. What happened in its palaces was even more twisted. If you think modern politics is dirty, ancient Rome took it to a whole new level. In the Roman Empire, power wasn't just something you earned, it was something you killed for. Behind the grand columns of the Senate and the golden robes of emperors was a world ruled by paranoia, betrayal, and bloodshed. Loyalty meant nothing. Friends turned on each other. Family ties were shattered. And the only rule was survival. It started early. Julius Caesar himself was stabbed 23 times by his closest allies, including men he considered like sons. And that wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of a political system soaked in violence. Take Emperor Caligula, for example. At first, he was celebrated as a promising young ruler, but then things took a terrifying turn. Rumors say he started calling himself a god, declared war on the sea, and even ordered his soldiers to collect seashells as spoils. People whispered he slept with his sisters, tortured enemies for sport, and executed anyone who looked at him the wrong way. No one was safe, not even his own family. Then came Nero, who started his reign with promise, but quickly spiraled into madness. He's believed to have murdered his own mother, stepbrother, and wife, all to protect his throne. When Rome caught fire in the Great Fire of 64 AD, some believe Nero started it himself. And what did he do while the city burned? According to legend, he played music and watched from a safe distance. But perhaps the most disturbing part of Roman politics was how normal this all became. Assassinations weren't shocking, they were expected. Poisoning was an art. And emperors ruled knowing any day could be their last. In fact, over 100 emperors ruled Rome, and nearly 2/3 of them died violently stabbed, strangled, poisoned, or forced to take their own lives. Behind the power and prestige, these rulers were constantly looking over their shoulders. Every friend was a possible traitor. Every dinner could be their last. Paranoia wasn't a weakness, it was a survival tactic. And the people? Most of them didn't care as long as the blood stayed inside the palace walls. But while the emperors were losing their minds, the Roman elite were sinking into something even darker.